Hello and welcome back to the Neurospiritual Awakening with Dr. Val. And today I have a very special guest, as always, but his name is Brian. I'm not even going to pronounce your last name. You could do that for me. But I'm really thrilled that you're on. I'm thrilled that you've accepted my invite. I'm thrilled to find out what you're all about, what your neurospiritual awakening is all about, or awakening. So yeah, I just want to say thanks and give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Brian Maierhofer.
Thank you.
One F, not two. I am an associate marriage family therapist. I spent a long time working in TV film as well. I think ultimately I'm a storyteller. I like to say, that stories chase me. I think stories are alive in the truest sense of the word. And looking forward to getting into it. Yeah, immediately when we first connected and I jumped over to your profile and saw, epigenetics, clinical neuroplasticity, and I was like, all right, this is my bag. Let's do it. Ready to ride.
All right, great. So as we go, perfect. I didn't know that that was what you were into, but perfect, because that's what I'm into. So we could definitely jam about that and open people's minds, eyes, ears, hearts, whatever souls to it. So, because I am an expert in that field, and part of my mission is really to bring concepts that may be difficult for people to understand to a very like 3D science ground, neuroscience based conversation, if you will, but I do like to span all realms, okay? Like
Beautiful.
I'm into all of that. But I didn't even know that you were that's what you were qualified as. That's amazing. Oh my goodness, what a service to humanity, seriously.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, and I do a lot of somatic work. Recently, my interest has more pulled me towards, neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. Would not consider myself an expert at all. Forever a student, but some of the areas in which I am a little bit more versed in knowledge, so I studied depth psychology. So, my master's is at a depth psychological school. So it's a lot of, mythology through, symbolic psychological lens. Again, I'm an athlete as well. So the somatic therapy, the body work is super crucial for me as well. But huge on epigenetics and super interested to learn more of the science for sure.
Mm. Awesome. Well, you're in the right place and I'm in the right place. Great. So, Brian, look, I love that you love storytelling and you feel that stories follow you. Funnily enough, I think stories follow me too, because wherever I go, a story comes out of it. I'm telling you, I'm not going to tell them all in this episode, but geez, some stories are like, really? But I love that because from the epigenetic view on things, if you talk about or think about ancestral healing practices or ancestral rituals. I'm talking like indigenous people, Native Americans, or I'm currently in Australia. That's where I live, or like the indigenous people of Australia. There's a lot of storytelling and those kinds of ritual exercises, therapies, although they're not considered therapies, they're very therapeutic. It's all about the storytelling. That's how you involve all people and epigenetically create an environment that supports people's transformation, initiation, awakening, health, all well-being, all of the above. So I just love that you're into that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, there's something specific and innate within stories, within symbolic thinking, is the way that I like to describe it, that really builds coherence within the two hemispheres.
Yeah. Oh, that's how you think about it. Okay, great. I haven't thought about it that way, but for sure. Yeah, I guess look, the two brain hemispheres are differentially connected in males and females they tend to be more together, if you will. In males, you guys have more interconnectedness within each hemisphere, which allows for different functions or for different, I don't know, we can excel at different things, if you will.
Hmm.
But I never thought about it like that, other from the point of view of that technique, Psych K. Are you familiar with it? Psych
No.
K. It's literally a bunch of exercises where you tend to they're pretty funny. Like you kind of look left or look right and do a bunch of steps. But what that does, it connects the two brain hemispheres. So if you're trying to get over a let's say a fear of some sort, like let's say fear of flying, and the practitioner detects that your two hemispheres are not in connection or not in communication with each other, and that's what's causing the fear,
Hmm.
then you'll go through this like repetitive movements, connect the two hemispheres, do a bunch of visualization. And finally, it works. Like I've tested and tried. I've tried this on myself, and I had this fear
Totally.
of flying, and I'm not that scared of it anymore. So hey, I'm
Yeah.
with you there. But I never thought that storytelling would be one of those things that enhances the communication between two hemispheres. Um, that's amazing. There's people that are born without a corpus callosum, so without the thing that connects the hemispheres.
That's remarkable. Yeah.
I know. It's wild, right? There's people that are born without a corpus callosum, and get this, because of neuroplasticity, the capacity of our brain to rewire itself based on an experience, these people tend to live somewhat normal lives. Can you like incredible, right?
It really is. Yeah. Yeah.
That's all. I don't know. I got sidetracked there, but I just thought about it. I'm like, wow, there's people that live without ultimately a corpus callosum, which is the thing that connects the two hemispheres. And here we are talking about, yay, let's connect the two and things will arise. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that a lot of what we know about the brain, and this is more your area of expertise, is as a result of traumatic brain injuries, right? And
Hmm.
certain injuries, certain deficits within brain function that really illuminate that. And when you were speaking on the bilateral activation of the visual cortex and go, I know there's a basis of a lot, MDMR or EMDR, the woman who discovered that, she was walking through a forest and kind of noticed the same thing. And, you may help illuminate me a little bit. Is it accurate that within our sort of visual plane, if we were sort of split it into these kind of four quadrants, different quadrants of our visual plane are connected to different aspects of brain functioning? So being able to drag the eyes and the bilateral activation within different quadrants as we're reprocessing memory, et cetera, activates different parts of the brain. Is that completely accurate?
There's a little more depth to it. From my experience as a neuroscientist, only 10% of what we actually look at any given point is raw data. 90% is brain generated from the past, from past experiences. So believe it or not, you're looking at me, you think you're looking at me freshly, but no, you've probably seen someone that looks like me in the past,
Mhm.
and now your brain's just regenerating for you what you think you're looking at. And that makes things like visualizations, obviously being an athlete, you would know that's very, or manifestation experts, like visualizations are very powerful because you do visualize with the brain, because ultimately you do see with your brain. However, within the 10% raw data, I wouldn't say that you're not, I'd say you're not wrong. Yeah, different brain areas pick up on different, I think there's more than four quadrants, but on different locations, if you will, space and time, maybe even.
Hmm. Yeah, this is
Yeah,
a rabbit hole. We could definitely go a little bit deeper in
I
if time
know.
allowed, but yeah.
I know. But like, I was just amazed and astounded to learn that, well, I mean, I'm a neuroscientist, so mostly it's like, yeah, I learn this, I know this, then I move on to the next thing. But when I came across the fact that, hey, 10% is raw, 90% is brain generated, like that allows for a lot of room for lots of things, things like mind control, things like not just like normal conditioning or the world that we're born into, we're preconditioned. Yeah, I mean, we are, but
Hmm.
there's other things that we're exposed to on an individual
Hmm.
level, on a societal level, different dynamics. So it makes things quite interesting. I love to look at it with a positive outlook, if you will, because I'm here to
Of
ultimately
course.
to not to enlighten the planet, but to bring light to the world rather than it's all fucked. Because, with that view, well, what are we doing here?
Big time. Big time. Yeah, I think folks really underestimate suggestibility
Hmm.
within the brain, right? And what is it? I don't know, 95% of our mind or our decision making is all subconscious. I know that statistic gets jumped around. I don't know where it's from. I think it was
It
from,
is, it is, let's
yeah.
say over 90%, just like within the visual field, let's say it's over 90%. I'm pretty sure it's over 95%. Again, I'd have to look at the rigorous, well, I'd have to conduct that research myself to tell you from firsthand
Yeah.
experience. I haven't done that, but from the research that I've read and I've looked at, it seems to be definitely over 90, but yeah, over 95% most of the time is subconscious behavior, which is really like interesting because then you think about, well, what's coming out of my mouth? Is that actually a novel idea? Am I responding to you and to what
Hmm.
you're saying? Or is this just, patterns of repeated behavior um, that I'm eliciting?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many different ways that we could look at this and talk about this too, right? I mean, I'm such a huge fan of Carl Jung. I think he was off about a lot of things, but right about many, and more of a mystic more than anything else. And one of the cornerstones in my belief and in the cornerstones of my work is the idea of us having emotional complexes, right? So a complex being a constellation of psychic and emotional energy that exists autonomously outside of our own ego, right? So we're not in direct relationship to it consciously. And these complexes can hijack our ego and our decision making. And you touched on where they come from, right? I mean, we have cultural complexes, we have family complexes, we have individual complexes based off of our own past history. We may have karmic complexes as well, right? There's so many different layers. And I think as we are, there's a massive paradigm shift that's taking place in medicine and in health and in neuroscience, et cetera. And I don't know if you listened or to the telepathy tapes. That's kind of been a hot button recently, but this idea of, and especially with social media and the weaponization of political polarization, et cetera, the idea of cognitive sovereignty is way more important now than ever before.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's a lot, like what you just said. I'm still processing, and I'm sure so are our listeners, because it's like there's a lot to what you said, and a lot of it I resonate with, and it's valid for me as well, especially as a neuroscientist who's left academia. I mean, I've left the lab. Yeah, because of what you just said. There's this ma
Mm,
massive paradigm shift within the medical community, which I was a scientist within, and also just as a human being, there's a lot like people are leveling up, if you will, on a spiritual level as well. A lot of, some people are saying the veil's been lifted, whatever the veil means for you, right? But I can definitely see a lot of people are more attuned to what's happening energetically and spiritually. They realize that, hey, there's more than just this 3D reality, this body. And this brings me to the concept of this external, I guess, not external, but something that we're in connection with, this consciousness that's present, that's malleable, just like the brain. I don't think the brain creates consciousness per se. I think it takes a whole bunch of organs to
mm-hmm,
create such a thing as consciousness.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I'm not even, I think maybe consciousness is what creates the body rather than the other way around. Anyway,
mm,
I don't know how I got to that
mm.
realization, but that's kind
Yeah,
of what
more as a vessel, I would say. And undoubtedly, consciousness is non-local.
mm,
I mean, I've in the sake of transparency, I've 100% had experiences where my consciousness has entirely left my body, looking back down at my body. Right? You call that
yes.
astral projecting, whatever it is, the non-local nature of reality.
Yeah.
And I think, I thought of something when you were speaking about consciousness being centered in the brain. So I don't know if you've seen some of this recent literature surrounding, I'm going to butcher how it's pronounced, but microtubulars. Tubulars, are you familiar with this?
Microtubules? Yeah, microtubules.
Microtubulars,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
they've now pretty much been able to verify work in a quantum manner.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of research around there with like neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, et cetera, and how that specifically that area of the brain responds to ultrasound.
Uh-huh.
And there is some illuminating stuff that may be indicating that that area of our brain may not be the generator of consciousness, but maybe the receptor of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's more like it. I think we're definitely receptors or little antennas or big antennas, whatever, for different things, for different wavelengths, frequencies, energies, including consciousness, which of course is a, not of course, but in my view is a global phenomenon. We're all connected through that consciousness, in one
Hmm.
way or another. And I always say that sometimes I don't want to be connected to some individuals on that level, but like it or not, we are. We're all kind of co-creating this reality. And
Hmm.
whether we like it or not, whether we like to astral project or go into other realms or dimensions, I have friends that can access 15 different dimensions. I'm like, holy fuck, how do you even live like that? But
Yeah.
okay. But in for the most part, here we are. We're in this conversation over this whatever screen, Zoom, blah blah blah. People will be listening to it via their auditory, you know, devices, let's say. So yeah, there is this co-creation that is happening because we're connected at the conscious level, and it is rising, like you said. There is a paradigm shift within that. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, this was something that I struggled with for a long time in sort of recognizing the narrative of, you called it awakening or ascension or your spiritual growth and whatever it is. And obviously that narrative was increasing in potency, in availability, etc. And there was a part of me that was like, okay, is this just in vogue? Is this just trendy? Is this a result of the internet, the result of, even in some ways, increasing mental illness? Because I think there's a lot of that within that as well.
Mm.
Um, but I've entirely flipped the script on that. I just, as a result of my own personal experiences in this process. I think it's obviously a little bit of both, but there is, I believe that the collective, right, source, God, this energy, whatever this may be, light, is asking something of us specifically at this time right now on a collective scale. And I think in so many ways it is a return to, Rene Descartes, the Cartesian split in the 1600s, and hopefully being able to sort of right that wrong a little bit, right? Hopefully it is, finding greater balance, or, within the dualistic framework of mind and matter, of which we, operated from for such a very long time. Yeah, so I mean, I think, inherently underneath this shift, in many ways, what comes to mind for me is the symbol of power. I
Mm.
think that there is a massive reframe within our collective understanding of power, both individual power, systemic, collective, national, however we want to look at it, whether you look at, Hollywood and Weinstein and P. Diddy, or what's going on in politics or whatever. There is massive shifts within our understanding of power right now. Um,
Hold that thought for a sec. What do you mean when you say power? Because there's a way that I understand it, right? To me, power is the velocity or the speed or rate with which you can realize an intention. It's an intention
mm,
fulfilled in reality. The quicker it gets fulfilled in reality, that's power. In my understanding, which I understand is very specific. So what's yours?
Yeah, I just think, we're coming out of so much cultural conversation around power dynamics, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in between gender, sort
Mm,
of, there is, we've obviously existed in a massive sort of hierarchical framework, which I think in many ways is evolutionary, is sort of innate, but has also been co-opted and perpetrated, and et cetera. So I think there is an awakening around this idea of outsourcing your power,
yeah.
outsourcing it to another person, an institution, right? And it's a reframe around empowerment, right?
Mm,
Shifting from the pursuit of power
mm.
into the embodiment of empowerment.
That's so, I love that. Like the idea, the energy of what you're saying, and that definition of power, self-empowerment, like being your own source of guidance or how you live your life. Even on a spiritual level, a lot of people within that community are like, oh, I'm gonna ask my guides, angels, guardian angels, or my higher, like all the shit, right? But the thing is you're the one living your fucking life here in 3D. They're just watching you. Like, so how can you outsource your power even to these things, right? Which we all have, and I believe in them because I've got them. And yeah, they're very resourceful, but ultimately they're in the court. I mean, they're in the stands. I'm living my life here now. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
self-empowerment is crucial, and even in that sense, because just because.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agency, right? I
Mm,
mean, I think at the end of the day, this is what a lot of people are seeking, right? They think they want some shiny things or XYZ, and those are great. It's wonderful to have desires, but like underneath a lot of our wants is a greater desire for agency, right? Potency, the ability to influence the direction of our life in a way in which we intend, right? And what you just spoke
yeah,
on, right? Like
yeah.
that ultimately for me, like that is power, that is empowerment, that ability.
Hmm. Yeah, and why is that important to you? Or I mean, to many people, but to you personally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for a long time, I think I operated under a fallacy that I didn't have that sense of agency or that ability. I think B, that there is a cultural narrative, specifically with men and young men, that sort of turns and shies them away from claiming and owning that. There's a great fear around that. And I really became an adult through 12 step programs. And
Hmm.
so I don't know if you're familiar with the 12 steps, right? But the word power is riddled all throughout the book and all throughout those first three steps, right? You're powerless over something, came to believe
Hmm.
that a power greater than you turned your life over to a power greater than yourself. So I've thought a lot about that and thought a lot about my own behavior in relation to this idea of powerlessness. And I think in so many ways, that aspect of powerlessness can extend way beyond a food or a drink or a drug or whatever it is. I mean, I just spoke on these emotional complexes that can grab people and put them in positions of powerlessness where they're doing things in which they do not intend, right? And so I think it's really about finding the tension between the both between a proportionate relationship to power, what actually falls within the umbrella of our own agency, our own influence, and where do we need to sort of ride the razor sharp edge of true surrender and relying on a power outside of ourselves, whether it's two minds coming together in this conversation, friends, family, a higher power, a spiritual power, whatever it is. It's really about striking the balance between the two of those for me.
So valuable. I was just thinking about power on a level of neuroplasticity, on the neural level, because neuroplasticity, as I said before, is the capacity of our brain to rewire itself. And in behaviors where you experience is one of powerlessness, ultimately you haven't yet formed those neural pathways for being empowered. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
empowerment or being empowered on a behavioral level is a neural circuit.
Mm.
So, and it's trained, yeah, because you've experienced having no power or little power versus being empowered. Yeah, and I
Mm-hmm.
have as well as a human being many times over, and will continue to do that, and will probably explore and discover new levels of power, if you will, you know. Um, but on a neural level, I think if you're like, oh, I'm disempowered, don't fret. You know what? Because it's a trained behavior. You may listen to this conversation, be like, oh wow, really, I lack power in this area of my life within my career. I'm going to do something about it. And that forms the neural pathway. And
Mm-hmm.
you then strengthening that neural pathway in whatever way, shape, or form, like you just mentioned, speaking to family members, friends, that social interaction, that is one of the best things you could do for your brain ultimately in terms of connecting, the prefrontal cortex to all the other areas. Um, yeah, like in enhancing that behavior. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that how funny, right? I like rediscover for myself as a neuroscientist that neuroplasticity is a cool concept over and over again every
Yeah,
day, every day.
I
Yeah.
love that. I'm actually curious. I'd love to speak a little bit about on neurogenesis.
Sure. Let's talk about neurogenesis, the birth of new
Yeah.
neurons. What do you want to know?
Yeah, well, I'm curious, so my own understanding in the difference of sort of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, right?
Yeah.
So like neurogenesis being this idea where you get brand new neurons in which to work.
Yes.
And this goes beyond simple like glutamate of being able to like learn new things, right? This is literally like a brand new blank slate as opposed to neuroplasticity being maybe more closely associated with conditioned learning, more connected to the neurotransmitter of glutamate. Am I correct on that understanding?
Uh, no.
Okay, that's why I'm here.
No. Great. So neurogenesis is a subtype of neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity can happen via rewiring of already existing connections, but it could also happen via the birth of new neurons. It's just a subtype of neuroplasticity. So yeah, the genesis of new neurons,
Got you.
neurogenesis is a type or a subtype of neuroplasticity. Um,
Okay, makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm really interested in a lot of the literature that's coming out right now surrounding ibogaine. I don't know if
Mhm.
you're familiar with it with this plant medicine.
I haven't personally experienced it, but I have a really good friend, a PhD. We did our PhDs together, and he does all sorts of experimentation on himself, and that's so I've learned from his experience, let's just say. So, but for our listeners, just like elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, yeah. So ibogaine being a psychedelic compound that operates sort of biochemically in a very specific way that the research is indicating can be extremely crucial for neurogenesis.
Uh-huh. I don't doubt it. A lot of these things are like is it part of the Brugmassia plant? Is that ibogaine?
I
Is
believe
that
so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, cool. That's okay. But cool, cool, cool. So I believe that yes, these things like ibogaine, other plant like ayahuasca plant medicines, magic mushrooms, whatever, psilocybin, they do cause neuroplasticity uh, by ultimately rewiring your brain. But yeah, the growth of new neurons is very much plausible in those situations as well. I'd say absolutely, why not? You do grow new neurons, and you grow new neurons with practices as well. I mean, meditation. Um, Meditation practice is one of the fastest ways to grow new neurons is to meditate. And I know we
Mhm.
all meditate differently, but maybe during those ceremonies with ibogaine or whatever, like in those ancestral indigenous ceremonies, ultimately you're combining plant medicine with a form of meditation. So I'm not surprised. Yeah, new neurons grow, start to thrive within those environments. Um,
Totally.
yeah, I'd,
Totally.
I'd say, of course, of course, of course. New neurons grow all the time. They don't grow at the same rate, like when you're a baby. Obviously, in the first 3 years of life, there's lots of neurogenesis happening. And then as we age, there's much less. But not to say that it ain't happening, because I know that was a big misconception for a while where practitioners and different individuals said like, oh, you do drugs, you will kill your brain. Yeah, you do, but ultimately you also grow new neurons. It's not like you just kill them off forever and ever. You can grow new neurons. You're not, if you've led a certain life, you're not fucked. Like neuroplasticity says that you can rewire your brain and grow new neurons. You can alter your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I am gearing up. I'm actually going to a 7 day Joe Dispenza meditation retreat here
Ooh,
next week, which is huge. I know he's big on the
cool.
neuroplasticity. And then I've been reading in you probably would have been better off talking to my girlfriend because she's actually the neuroscientist in the relationship, the neuroplastic, savant. But so
Yes.
she's introduced me to, I don't know if you know Dr. Sarno's work. He wrote a book on overcoming back pain through neuroplasticity many years ago. Dr. Howard Schubiner, a lot of these practitioners who are traditional MDs, but then really kind of shifted and adopted this neuroplastic approach from anything from chronic pain to even more debilitating disorders. I really believe that this is the future of medicine in many ways.
Same. If we don't hand it over completely to AI, which is, talk about handing over our power to something else, but I'll leave
Hmm.
that conversation for another podcast.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, neuroplasticity, one of my friends, she runs this journal, and her name's, I had her on the pod, and it's called the Frequency Shift Activation Journal. It ultimately, you're tapping into the subconscious mind, da da da. And she has this list of extensive list. I'm talking about like a very extensive list of practices in which you can use to alter your life. But all of those practices induce neuroplasticity, and there's gold in them hills. I'm telling you. I know I sound very Australian, but I've been here for a while. But like there's things like radionics. I was like, what the fuck is radionics? And I learned literally, I learned what that is, and that causes neuroplasticity. Even people getting in touch with their psychic abilities or astral projection, that's you forming a new neural pathway you didn't have 2 seconds ago before you
Hmm.
levitated, dude. It's all neuroplasticity based. Us expanding our consciousness is on a physical level is neuroplasticity.
Mm.
There's other tapping into different dimensions is neuroplasticity. It's you literally forming that new neural pathway that's never been used before. And then if you want to do that more often or with more proficiency, great. Well, practice it. It's like going to the gym. That's the way the brain works. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I would
Mm.
love to just share a little bit. I'm kind of curious, some of your insights on, my favorite way to increase neuroplasticity. Well, first off, I would love that list or that article or that journal from your friend. I'd love if you could send that to me. That
I'll
sounds
send
really
it to
cool.
you. It's super cool. It's wild. But yes, yes, I will.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, as somebody who like really adores somatic therapy, I'm not certified in somatic experiencing or anything like that, but as an athlete and then as a therapist, I've dug really deep into, I call it somatic psychology because I just think it's a little bit more broad and there's a lot more going on. So I have found that one of the best ways to improve emotional, physical, mental well-being and to really increase neuroplasticity is to increase our proprioception. So do you know what that term means? I'm sure you
Well,
probably
tell
do.
me what you mean by that term. Yeah.
Okay. So proprioception as in our ability to be aware of our body's movements in space, right?
Okay.
So the process of Umswelt, right, which is the way an organism moves through space. And
Yep.
now they're going to rely on two things, right? Or many things, but our interoception, which is our ability to identify internal bodily signals, and then our proprioception, which are some of the external cues of where our body is in space. So you think about, right, our human bodies, we have a biofield that exists around us,
Hmm.
right? And so being able to increase our proprioception, our mind's eye's ability to feel. I use the term body mind actually as opposed to mind in homage to Candace Pert, which I'm sure you probably know as a neuroscientist. Increases our body mind's ability and intelligence to move through space and be aware of their body positioning in space, right? I mean, athletes have this in a really heightened way. So I like to throw on a blindfold and I will dance and move in my living room or throw on a blindfold and try and sort of sensate my ability to move through space, right? To even go through my kitchen, know through memory, but through sensate as well, where the fridge is, where the dining table is, and really move through that process. And so this was all kind of innate and kind of came through me in this funny way as a psychonaut and as an explorer of self. And then as I dug a little bit deeper into the literature, I found that the area of the brain, the temporal parietal lobe, I'm pretty sure, but again, I'm talking to an expert, that is activated during states of transcendence and mystical experience is
Hmm.
also the part of our brain that is sort of responsible for this proprioception as well. So there's something there. I'm not entirely sure what it is yet, but I think there's something there. I'm curious if you have any thoughts.
That's okay. Look, I think like just like with the our brain generating most of what we see in the same way in those kinds of experiences. Your brain is also in whatever brain area you're tapping into it. And of course, all brain, yes, there's the generalized idea of what lobe does what function, but also different brains are different. So your brain's wired. I'm talking about, neurodiversity. Ultimately, every
Mm-hmm.
brain's a unique brain. So the way that your brain does things will be completely different because you've had a different life experience altogether. But in that sense, I think, yeah, you can, the brain does things for you, whether you have a blindfold on or on. And, that's also questionable whether we have a blindfold on even when we're awake.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of it is preconditioned, I would
Yeah.
say. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's very interesting, and it sounds like you're really exploring it in your own life, which is so valuable, isn't it? Because and this is more a bit of my obsession with ontology. It's, the metaphysical branch of being, like who we be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that experience of a bit like Heideggerian philosophy and all that, but it's really, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's really exploring like the being rather than anything else, and the being that becomes in on a cellular level then a body and with all the bodily memory, sensations, all of that.
Totally.
So
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
but before, sorry, yeah.
No, no, no. Go ahead. I mean, I don't know. Time wise, my head jumped to some other interesting stuff and like all good, but
No, no, this is juicy. Let's keep talking for a bit. You've got the time. I've got the time. Let's keep talking. This is going to be one of those podcasts where I went beyond the 30-minute threshold that I usually set
yeah.
because I think this is very valuable. Let's just keep going. So let me think what I wanted to say. Oh, when were you like throughout your life's journey? When did you ultimately go through the quote unquote awakening? And as I was saying to you before, awakenings are different and there's different levels of awakening. Like I think I'm woke now. Tomorrow I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm a fucking idiot. So it's just
Yep.
different. So at what stage though were you like, wow, okay, 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 okay.
Yeah, so there's been a handful, I think that perhaps there is something not unique to me as an individual, but unique in my disposition and temperament and how I was organized in the manner that God saw fit, that just put something in me, this sense of wanting, desiring to turn over every stone, this curiosity, this wonder, this sort of spiritual drive to connect, which simultaneously comes with my deep relationship and recognition to a sense of longing or that void, or sort of this recognition of this deep immortal self, right? This true sense of oneness, of spark that exists within me. And then holding the paradox of knowing that that's me, while also simultaneously feeling that I'm not, feeling the void, feeling that lack in whatever that is, and how that can really sort of drive people into trying to be bigger than they are in some ways, right? Which I think causes people some immense suffering. But anyway, so throughout my 20s, I spent a lot of time in 12-step programs. That's a spiritual program, right? I mean, that was like a just baptism by fire for sure in the world of emotional mental health. But it actually wasn't until like my later 20s, early 30s when I decided to step into a different path that wasn't entirely based off of abstinence. And so I did explore some entheogens and some psychedelic compounds that really illuminated things for me. But one of my big ones was really centered around on somatic therapy. Specifically, David Berceli, tremor release exercises, TRE. I don't know if you're familiar, but I was able to put my body mind into a certain condition where my autonomic nervous system really took over the mammalian brain, and suddenly I was experiencing involuntary movement through my body
Hmm.
as the body is discharging excess cortisol and stress and completing its arousal cycles. And so that, I mean, when that happens to somebody for the first time, I mean, talk about, I don't know, neurogenesis or neuroplasticity, or I mean, your neurology is forever changed when that
Yeah.
happens for the first time, right? And so really following that path deeper and understanding that there's so much more to me and to this, interconnected system of self and other in many ways that really just blew the lid off of my reality. and what I thought was possible. And suddenly I was in an entirely different reality. And then I saw the evidence of that in some of what we discussed before, right? The literature that's coming out, these new paradigms that are shifting. And so that was also what keyed into like, oh, okay, so what I'm experiencing is coming through me as this sort of human transmitter. Other people are experiencing this as well. And there's a very, very real thing that is happening there.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I love how we're all there is this collective awakening, if you will, in that sense. People are just that much more open, curious, and I have a lot of friends that are saying this year a lot of truths will come out, and they have, and it's like we've all almost been primed in the last 5 or more years as a society, as a populace, as humanity to maybe listen or kind of be aware of something that's going on. So I do, that's why I started the podcast. I'm like, I'll talk to different people about what they're experiencing, and and it thrills me to find out that we're all experiencing something on many different levels, but ultimately it's kind of bright, juicy. And I hopped off a call this morning where there was like an expert on mind control, and he was saying how he's been brought to different timelines, through horrible, like programs ultimately. But what he's learned is this is one of the brightest timelines humanity's been on. And I totally, I resonate with that because as much as there are days where I'm like, no, this really is fucked. For the most part, I like to stay in the light. I like to stay in the light, and I'm like, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening, including what's being said in this conversation. So I'm excited.
Me too. I agree with you
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
All
Mhm.
right, cool. Well, anything you want to pick at with me and my brain before I let you go, and of course we can talk again at another time, but anything you want to know or get or through the lens of neuroscience here.
There's probably too much for this medium. As I said, it's kind of my new horizon right now, being so psychologically minded. And I'm really interested in sort of, psychoneuroimmunology and just like the intersection of, neuroscience and medicine. And so nothing's coming through me now, but I'm super grateful that you had me on. I loved chatting with you, and yeah, to be continued.
Yeah, absolutely. And, pass all those questions or insights. Let's be in communication. But what's the last thing? What's the last thing you want to say? What's the last thing that's on your mind that you want to put out there to the listeners, just given your experience, this experience, and what, as a collective, we're going through right now?
Oh man, these questions. Or just like it's always the good one at the end. Like, what's your billboard? If you had a billboard up, what would it say? You know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, trying to think here. I would say to anyone who is faced with some challenges that there is more wisdom within your wounds than you may realize. And I would say that what sometimes seems and looks and feels like a regression is actually a regression in service to something much bigger.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for that message. I'm like, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm hearing you. What I'm hearing you. All right. Well, look, Brian, thanks so much. And how can people find you? Lastly.
Yeah, people can find me on, X. Twitter is actually my main platform. My at is I am pro human. My company's called Professional Human. I've got a podcast on YouTube. Brian Maierhofer, not hard to find. And, you could also find me on Netflix too if you do a little bit of digging. So
Well, thank you so much again. And yeah, thank you.
thanks, Val. Appreciate it.